Hello, welcome back to our animation course. Things are really starting to pick up now as we get our scene set up. So far we have our spaceship flying along a motion path. You can see it starting way up there and ends through here. So we're going to focus on the ending so we can make sure our spaceship is coming down where we want it to when it lands at the platform. So just kind of scrubbing through here around frame 120 and through to 150, which is where it ends right now. You can see it kind of stops right here, which is not quite far enough. Let's go ahead and select our handle for the landing platform. We can go ahead and extend our arms. We can open the doors too if we want to. So the ship needs to come in closer so that the end or the nose of the ship is resting over here. So we can do that a couple different ways, but let's grab the curve that is controlling movement so far. Right click on it, select Control Vertex. We can grab this point and move it. So we're moving the entire curve forward, and we're going to kind of reposition this to get it where we want it to be. You see it's not quite centered. So if I hold down the W key and left click, you'll see I get my Move Tool options. You can also get to these by double clicking on the Move Tool itself to get to the Move Tool settings. But it's a little bit handier and quicker to go. Just hold down W, left click, and I can get to my settings here. I'm going to change it to World instead of Object mode. So now my Move Tool will be oriented to the world as opposed to the object. And then I want to grid snap this CV that I have selected. I'm in the wireframe. You see I have the CV at the end of the curve selected. I want to grid snap it to the center grid line. If I go to the side view and turn on the grid, you can see this dark line running up and down through here. Hold down X and grid snap it to there, so now it's centered along with the landing platform. So here we have the ship more where it should be, and we need to adjust the curve slightly to get it right where we want it to be. So you can see that the ship is just kind of straight to the left and right. To get this to dock appropriately, the ship actually needs to angle downward slightly, something like this. So let's select the curve, right click on it, select Control Vertex. So we know the end of the curve here. Let's look at the next point, which would be over here. So we want the ship to kind of come down at an angle. So we're going to maneuver this point until the ship is angled about where we want it to be, like so. And we need it to fit into these arms as well. So we need to, looks like we need to move the end CV a little bit, so we move it forward some. So now that handle here, this arm has grabbed the front of it, and let's actually select the landing pad itself and Control H to hide it for now, just what's not in our view. So we can select this last CV here. We want to position this CV so that the arms are catching the ship right here. So you see that these arms are cupping these engine whales. And then the CV before that, we can angle it up, which will angle the ship downward in order to land into these arms that we have created for it. So between maneuvering these two CVs on the curve, we can control the final position of the ship. So something like this. So now as the ship flies in, it angles downward and gets caught, boom, right there, into the arms that we have designed for it. So Control Shift H to unhide the last hidden object, which would be the landing platform. So now as it comes in, bam, it lands right there, and the arms will reach up and catch it before it gets there. So we have that position. Let's look back at our curve here. We might have, since we raised this point up, we might have a little bit of a hump in our curve. We could, adjust these CVs on the curve slightly to get a more smoother arc as it comes rolling in, like so. I think that's going to do nicely. So we have the wings cutting into the landing platform, and that's why we have them set up to fold upwards. So as the ship comes into the landing platform, we're going to have the wings fold up. So let's roll it back here. So when do we want the wings to start folding upwards? We want them to start so they're not moving too fast. So at frame 150 is when it lands. So let's say even half a second might be too short, but let's try it. So 15 frames before frame 150 would be frame 135. And that's pretty short. So let's actually do a full second. So from 150 minus 30 frames would be 120. So at frame 120 over here is when the wings will start folding upwards. And so as it rests in the landing platform, the wings won't cut into the landing pad geometry. So at frame 120, we can select our ship control handle right here. We have our left wing and right wing controls. So as they are now, with the wing pointing downward, select them both, left wing and right wing, right click and say key selected. And then before it gets to the final destination, and before the geometry starts clipping, so it needs to happen or at least be upwards before this, so we can have the animation take all the way to frame 150 so the wings don't actually stop until the ship does, but we can have the wings finish their motion before the ship actually lands. We can kind of justify that by saying maybe the ship is in a tractor beam or something and doesn't have to worry about the wings too much. So let's say maybe around 145 or 140, we can take the left wing and right wing values all the way up to 10 and then key those. So key selected. So now as the ship flies in, the wings start folding up, and when it lands, the wings have folded up completely. Like so. Pretty cool so far. And if you'd like, we can all go ahead and kind of animate the cockpit opening as if that's the final scene for our animation, although we still have a lot of work to do. So after the ship lands, we could wait a beat, say maybe a second or so. So at frame 180 or maybe 170, not too long, we can have the cockpit start to open. So cockpit open control, we can right click and say key selected at frame 170 with a value of 0. Then scroll up, let's say a second, we'll go all the way up to 200 and take the control all the way up to 10 and key selected. So as the ship flies in, it waits a moment and then the cockpit opens up. And if we add a few frames to the end here, let's say instead of ending at frame 200, we can end at 250 or so. So that way we have a little bit of a buffer after frame 200, so it doesn't just end right away. So it comes flying in, opens up, and then we have a moment to enjoy our handiwork at the end of the animation there. So before the ship actually lands, these arms are supposed to move up and out to catch it, right? So before the ship gets there, these arms will supposedly be retracted down into their compartments, and then before the ship arrives, the arms will open up and get ready to catch the ship. So we can animate that process now as well. Let's select our landing pad controls. So we know the ship's going to land at frame 150. So before it gets there, it needs to be ready to catch. And we can do it all together at first, and then we can kind of offset them to make it a little more interesting. So let's grab our everything that we have here and scroll it all the way back down to 0, so it's all back to its set position where everything is closed up. So let's go back to frame, let's say frame 60 or so. So the ship is on its way. It's way, let's see, where is it? It's way up there. So the ship's coming in for its landing. It's shot through the asteroids or whatever it's going to be doing, and it's coming down the path. And so the landing platform needs to be ready to receive. Let's say around frame 60 is when the landing platform starts to do its thing. So we'll grab our landing pad controls and choose our door controls, right, left, and middle. Right click and say key selected. So at frame 60 the doors are closed and are about to open. So how long should the doors take to open? We don't want it to take too long, but we also don't want it to be too quick either. But let's try, say, a second or so. So 30 frames from 60 would be frame 90. And we can move all the doors to the open position and key selected. We can play it a little bit just to see what it looks like. Hit play. So they slide open like that, and then the ship comes in for a landing. So between frame 90 and 150, those arms need to be out. So let's go ahead and start that position. We can have the doors open completely, wait a moment, like a beat, let's say maybe 15 frames or so. So from frame 90 to 105 would be 15 frames or half a second. And then maybe that's when the arms start to move. So let's grab the arms, arm controls, right arm, left arm, and middle arm. Right click and key select their values at 0 at frame 105. So how long do the arms take to actually come out? Well, 30 frames from 105 would be 1 second, so that's 135. And you can see the ship at frame 135 is like right there. It's coming in. So probably 1 second would be just enough time to get these arms out. So let's get them out. And key selected. Let's see how this plays out. Just looking at the landing platform. Boom. So as the arms do their thing, they're coming out, and then right after they finish setting, the ship sets into place. Then after a moment, the cockpit opens for the pilot to get in or get out, depending on how you look at it. So right now, all the doors and the arms are all opening at the same time. We've added in a little bit of variable movement with our arms, so that one is reaching up and out before it comes in to rest, so they're not doing the same thing at least, so that makes it a little more visually interesting. We can also kind of offset it, so all the doors don't necessarily have to open all at the same time. And the way we can control that, let's go back to the door motions. So let's grab our landing pad controls and open the graph editor. Window, animation editors, graph editor. So we have our right door, middle door, right arm, left arm, middle arm. We're going to focus on our doors, press F. So you see they're all doing the same thing, starting at 0 and going up to their 10 value over the course of this many frames. So what we can do is we can select, say, the right door by itself, grab both keyframes, press W for the move tool, hold shift and middle mouse click, drag, and kind of shift those keyframes over a couple frames. Then we can grab the left door and kind of do the same thing, maybe shift it back a couple frames. And then let's see what that looks like. So you see there, the doors are not opening all at exactly the same time. So it makes things a little, just subtly more interesting than just all of them open right away. The two arms, because their movement is so different, the fact that they're moving at the same time isn't too big of a deal. But we can offset that a little just to add that little bit of subtle difference. So back to our graph editor, we can grab our right arm, left arm, and middle arm, press F key to frame those. Because the middle arm had a range of 0 to 10, the curve is much shorter than the 0 to 100 range that the right and left arms had. So we can grab the left arm, select both keyframes, and we can again shift those keyframes over a little bit. So maybe grab the middle arm and do the same, going the other way as we scrub through here. Just a little bit of a difference in how they move. Hit play. And there's the ship. So another thing we can do is, as the ship is coming in for landing, we had the wings already move, but we can add a little bit of variance to their motion, just like we did with the arms. Having them move at the same time makes sense with it being a button press in the cockpit. You press the button to fold the wings up and they both move at the same time. That makes sense, but maybe have them not necessarily move quite so mechanically. We can select the spaceship controls, go into our graph editor, and we're looking at the left wing and right wing. Press F to frame it. So you see here we have again our straight line. What we can do is do similar to the motion path movement. Press W key to go into move tool, and we can adjust this curve so it's not quite so straight. It maybe has a bit of a plateau to it. And it'll be a little bit of a subtle difference, but the wings will kind of ease into their final positions. So the wings kind of slow down as they reach their final position as it comes flying in. And because everything's moving all at once, it might be a little bit hard to tell, but it's subtle. We can do the same thing again with the doors. Right now the doors just kind of slide open, And grab the landing pad controls, graph editor, right door, left door, middle door, press F. You can see all our doors, how they're offset from each other. That's fine. We can grab these handles, and again we can go this way, or we can actually, if we have the curve come in downwards like this, grab all these handles and have them come down like this. It makes the doors look like they slowly start to open and then they speed up as they finish their opening animation. Let's hit play and watch that. So again, subtle, but the doors kind of slowly open and then they kind of speed up as they finish. And you can adjust that in the graph editor as much as you'd like, of course. So if you go the other way with it, make sure you grab the handles, not the keyframes themselves when you're moving them. So you move this up, then grab these handles, not the keys, the handles, move them up like this. And this will do the opposite, where the doors move quicker at the beginning and then they kind of slow down as they finish their movement. Like so. Again, subtle, but it adds a little bit of extra oomph to the quality of the movement. So that's essentially our platform catch animation pretty much done. Thanks to those controls we set up, we took the time to set these controls up, which makes the actual animation process much easier and quicker. Now the motions that these arms are taking, that was all done with our set-driven key controls from before. So if you don't like them or want to change them, you definitely can do that. You just have to adjust those set-driven keys using the same steps that we did before. So let's wait for the next step in our animation course to go over the gun's shooting and the flight path that the ship takes as it comes in for its landing.